Good. Well, you'll get that in spades. Yes. Slow down. I want to send you all home tonight even more hopeful than you were coming in. And by the way, just so you know it, people who come out for talks like this, you self-select, you self-identify as the healthier. You're going to live longer than other people. And the people who really need to come to talks like this wouldn't dream of coming. So I often think I should send you all home, just say send a replacement, but since you're here, I'll go ahead. What I want to do, this topic I really love because I want to give you essentially the secret to a happy life. And that's a bold statement, but I can back it up with evidence. Some of the evidence produced by the brother of Dr. Valiant, one who's in attendance tonight. His brother George really did pioneering work, in fact, nailing down what indeed does translate into a happy life. And it sounds like such a impossible question, but we really do have strong empirical evidence now to guide us. And I got into asking this question in a very serious way some 23 years ago when my wife Sue and I, Sue gave birth to our first child, Lucy, and I remember so well bringing her home from the hospital, and we laid her down on the bed and started to change her diaper, and my wife started to cry. And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I have no idea how to be a mother." And later that day, I went out and got some Indian food. We'd fallen in love with Indian food during her pregnancy, and so I got some Indian food and brought it home and put it out on the kitchen table, and we sat down and I started to eat, and she was nursing Lucy, and she started to cry again. I said, "What's wrong now?" And she said, "I'm really hungry and I don't know how to nurse and eat at the same time." So I started feeding her, and it just seemed emblematic of our ineptitude, and here I was, a Harvard-trained child psychiatrist, and I didn't have a clue how to raise a child. And all my training had turned me into an expert in misery. I knew all about all the things that can go wrong, and all kind of fancy formulations and blah, 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 but give me a baby and the instruction, raise this child. I had no clue as to what to do. And it's a pretty important question. And it's not part of my training, it's not part of anybody's training. And so you sort of rely on homespun wisdom and sort of whatever happened to you as a child and people in your socioeconomic group. And I knew I didn't want to recreate my own childhood. I was talking to Dr. Valiant before, I often joke about, I come from an old New England WASP family, what you're very familiar with in Concord, to be sure, and characterized by what I call the WASP triad, which is alcoholism, mental illness, and politeness. They were wonderful people, my family, but they were usually drunk or crazy or both, and so they weren't able to provide the kind of stability you'd hoped for. And as I looked at my peer group, people in the same sort of socioeconomic group, what we were all doing, whether we knew it or not, so you have a plan whether you know it or not when you're raising your kids. And what we were doing, sort of knowing it, sort of not knowing it, is buying into what I call the pyramid model. Now, the pyramid model posits rests on the assumption that those kids will do best in life who do best in childhood. And by the way, best in life We don't need to mess around defining that too much. We all want the same outcome for our kids. If I polled the audience, we'd get tremendous congruency. We want our kids above all to grow up to be happy. You ask a parent, what do you want? First word out of the mouth, happy. Successful, achieve your goals, healthy, a good person, contribute to the world. We all want the same. There's no argument about what we want for our kids. But how to get there, then, most people don't have an answer. And if they look at what they're doing, most of the time, they're subscribing to this pyramid model. And again, those kids will do best in adulthood, do best in childhood. On the face of it, perfectly obvious. Yes, you should be number one, or as close to number one as you can be. So yeah, isn't that the American way? Aren't we all supposed to be all that we can be and go for the gusto and, be your best and, all these cliches that we grew up on. And it would be fine if it were true, but it's simply not true. There's very little correlation between your class rank in 5th grade and what kind of person you are at age 35. And yet, you find people doing crazy things in the service of this pyramid model, really warping childhood. I have an office in New York City, and there is a tutor, there is a daycare, there is a boot camp in New York City that will toilet train your infant by age 6 months to increase their chances of getting into the elite daycare, nursery school, blah, 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 blah. Child abuse, and then there's a tutoring agency that has gotten to know the private schools in Manhattan, the Fenns of Manhattan, the Dalton and Dalton and Brearley and Collegiate, the private schools of Manhattan, gotten to know those schools and know the teachers and know the courses well enough so that if your son or daughter is only getting a B+ in European history in 11th grade at Dalton, say, you can get a tutor who knows that course, knows that teacher, all but guarantee your kid will get an A, thereby increasing the chances of getting into heaven, otherwise known as Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. And guess what the hourly fee for that tutor is? $1,500. $1,500 per hour. And there's a waiting list. You have to apply a year in advance. It's an agency started by a Wall Street lawyer who saw an opportunity. He's making far more money running this operation than he was as a Wall Street attorney. Absolute madness, driven by parents' love, anxiety, and ignorance. So, as we were raising Lucy, I decided I wanted to find out everything I could about what can parents do, given that we can't control everything. What can we do to maximize the chances that our kids will get to where we hope they'll get to? It was a good time to start looking into this because not only George Valiant's grant study, but other people were coming out with all kinds of wonderful new information. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and his studies on flow, Marty Seligman and his wonderful work in positive psychology, and really revolutionizing the whole field of psychology. And David Myers and Angela Duckworth and her remarkable research into the concept of grit. These really important seminal studies rooted in empirical data, not philosophy. Nothing against philosophy, but it's nice to have some numbers on your side. And the news is very good. It's very good. That, guess what? You don't have to be number one in your class. You don't have to be captain of the football team. You don't have to have a 4.0. You don't have to get perfect scores on your SATs. And you know, we all know this, and yet we're so powerful is the snow job of this pyramid model that people worship it like some golden calf. But if you just stop for 1 second and think, you know, look at all the people you know who are leaders of the community, who are people you'd be thrilled to have your kids grow up and be like, who weren't stellar students, maybe didn't even graduate from college or even high school. And yet they found a way to achieve, not only achieve, but also contribute and embody the best in life. So if it's not the pyramid model that produces the wonderful outcomes we all want, what does work? And guess what? It works for adults as well as children. So what I'm about to tell you about is as good for you as it is for the kids. And it's particularly important that you hear it now, because we live in an age that is way too fear-filled. Parents, everybody is feeling way too anxious. You know, we're worried about the economy, we're worried about 3 billion new capitalists, you know, we're worried about pollution, we're worried about, well, everything under the sun we're worried about. And we have this sort of pulsating media that just keeps beating at us with bad news. And so we get stoked up on bad news every day, and we live in a state of kind of chronic low-grade anxiety. And that's not good. It's not good for us. It's not good for our children. And you add into the fact that our greatest antidote for fear, which is another person, that's disappearing. You know, the modern paradox. We are connecting more electronically, exponentially more electronically than ever before in human history. It's the defining achievement of our era, electronic communications technology. So we are super connected electronically. Paradoxically, as we've been doing that, we've been disconnecting interpersonally. And that's why your coming out tonight and supporting this organization is so hugely important, because more and more people are not coming out. They're not showing up. They're living more and more the online life, more and more the cyber existence, and the human moment is disappearing and being replaced by the electronic moment. And the electronic moment is a pale imitator of the human moment. Sure, the electronic moment has its place, and it's great. I'm not a Luddite saying turn back the clock, but I am saying use the electronic moment for what it's best at, which is data transmission. But don't use it for emotion. Don't use it to solve problems. Don't use it to create intimacy. Go in person. Unfortunately, the electronic moment is so convenient and so cheap that people revert to using it when in fact they should be having face-to-face conversations. So what is this good news that I want to give you? It's a 5-step plan that I formulated, again, having poured through a lot of research as well as talking to happy people. Part of my research it was really fun talking. You can tell when you're with someone and they're happy. And you just say to them, what happened to you as a kid that led you to be the way you are today? And boy, do they always have an answer. Always have an answer. It's a great conversation starter if you with someone, you know, what happened to you that made you into the person you are today? And they'll start talking right away. And so I talked to lots of happy people, and I talked to various experts in the field. I had access to a wide range of, and then came up with what I'm about to share with you. 5 steps. I'll name the 5 and talk about each one. The first is to connect. The second is to play. The third is to work. The fourth is to make progress. The fifth is to receive recognition, which in turn connects you to the people or agency recognizing you, thus completing the cycle. There's no pyramid involved. This is open to absolutely everyone. Everyone can lay claim to a fulfilling, exciting, action-packed, wonderful life if you do these 5 steps. Now, the first step is by far the most important, and it's the one that I'll talk about at by far the greatest length. The force of connection. If there is one force in all of life, more than anything else, that drives growth, joy, achievement, satisfaction, fulfillment, health, longevity, it is this force of connection. What do we mean by connection? It's a feeling. It's pre-verbal. It's a feeling in your bones that you're a part of something larger than yourself that is beneficent. A feeling in your bones that you go to sleep with it, you wake up with it, it's just always with you. And that force of connection, as Henry's brother George says, love is the answer, full stop. At its most distilled, we call it love. But as it thins out, we call it connection. And it is the beauty of connection is it's free and it's infinite in supply. The sad thing is people don't take it seriously enough. I've written now 18 books. Of all my books, the book I wrote about forgiveness by far sold the least. By not even close. It was called Dare to Forgive. If I'd wanted it to sell, I should have written a book called Get Even, love is a really tough sell. It's a really tough sell. For what is demonstrably the most important force in all of life, people walk right past it. Don't give me that. Soft. Give me my Prozac. Give me frequent flyer miles. Don't give me connection. That's soft. Well, it's anything but soft. It's anything but soft. There's just a ton of data that people who lead a connected life are in every way better off. Do you know that social isolation is as dangerous a risk factor for early death as cigarette smoking? And yet you'll never see it listed in risk factors. All you'll see is obesity, family history, high blood pressure, cholesterol, cigarette smoking. They never list social isolation, but it's just as dangerous. This was shown by Lisa Berkman, who's now at the Harvard School of Public Health. It's a finding we've had available for 30 years, and yet it doesn't get talked about. There's something about connection that makes people uneasy, that scares them. They'd much rather sue someone than make up with someone. Suing, it's America's second favorite indoor sport, all right, let's sue, I'm going to sue his ass, that feels good. Forgive? Oh, God, that's terrifying. So the deck is stacked against us in many ways, but the data is very clear. If you want to be happy, live long, feel fulfilled, live a connected life. Now, how do you do that? Well, if you're raising a child, you get a running start at birth. God, I happen to believe in God. I'm an Episcopalian. If you don't believe in God, fill in whatever you use instead of God. But, that force gives you a running start. The moment you have a child, your life changes forever. You are never the same person again. You change radically in a way that nothing will ever change you. You enter into a permanent state of psychosis. You fall insanely in love with this little peeing and pooping machine, and you become instantly willing to give away your time, your money, your sleep, your dignity. And you say it's the greatest thing I've ever done. I'll do it again. We're crazy, we parents, and absolutely crazy in a wonderful, wonderful way. So that's the running start you give is just this instinctive, instantaneous outpouring of altruism and love and devotion that we all feel for our babies, and it's a good thing that we do. And that's really the spinal column of a connected life, that bond between a parent and child. I think it's the single strongest emotion in all of human existence. If you look at the great literature, it's all about that. It's all about parents and children. And it's a powerful, powerful, powerful force. Trust it. Honor it. Cultivate it. Don't dismiss it as trivial. It's the most important thing in the world. How do you cultivate it? How do you spend time with your kids? My first rule of parenting: enjoy your children. If you enjoy them, it's almost for sure you're doing it right, unless you're just smoking pot with them all day or something. But have fun with them. Have fun with them. Do things you like to do. In our family, we happen to be big Patriot fans. We're season ticket holders. We make a big deal about tailgating, and every game is a big to-do, and it's a big celebration. Have fun together. Having fun together, everyone's getting a big bolus of connection. And it's not just good for the kids, it's really good for you. It's really good for you. So make time for fun time. Make time for family dinner. Read aloud at bedtime, or have breakfast together. You take walks together. Just in the car, talk. Don't just go into your earphone zone. Try to deliberately and intentionally create every day this feeling of connection. It's something that happens over time, but if you want to make it happen, you absolutely can. You absolutely can, but you do have to intend to. Because the tropism of modern life is to whisk you away. We're always being pulled away. Linda Stone years ago coined the phrase. She said, "People now pay continuous partial attention." Rare do you get someone's full attention. It's as if there are these magnets out there that are pulling you away, and so you have to say, no, I want to be with my kids. I want to be with my spouse. I want to be with my friends. I want to be with this group tonight. I want to be here and get into it, and I'm going to try to screen out the rest. And if you intend to, you can do that. And then you begin to get this force, this connection thing, that is just so tremendously protective, and not only protective, but formative, growth-producing. Connection to family, then, is the spinal column of a connected life. And yes, families have conflict. Don't think if you have conflict, that means you're not connected. Quite the opposite. Conflict and connection go hand in hand. You can't have intimate connection without conflict. The opposite of connection is not conflict. The opposite of connection is indifference. The people you don't think about, that you don't argue with, those are the ones you're disconnected from. And so fight all you want. Just try to do it without bloodshed, but if you have conflict, and what family doesn't, that's a mark of connection. What else goes into a connected life? Well, a connection to the neighborhood, the family you create, the neighborhood. And now that includes the cyber neighborhood. The friends you pick, the people you associate with. And make time for friends. Make time for friends. A lot of grown-ups, adults don't. Big mistake. Now, you can't make time for a lot of friends, but make time for a few really good friends. I have a squash game that I play on Tuesday afternoons. I've been playing with my friend Peter Metz for over 30 years. And we both stop work early and play squash and go have a beer. And it's become a real pillar of my life, and that friendship. You want to really nourish friendships, and by example, encourage your children to do the same. Kids take to it, most kids, naturally. And then the connection for adults to work and for kids to school. Now, the connection to school is quite different from the numbers you put up at school. By your connection to school, I mean how you feel when you walk in the front door. If you feel welcomed, if you feel safe, if you have a person you're looking forward to seeing, an activity, even if it's just lunch or recess, then you're connected. The grades are pretty much irrelevant, but how you feel walking in that front door. Now, for some kids, it's no problem. But for other kids, it is a problem. And in my own case, when I started first grade back in 1955, I'm 63 years old, so in Chatham, down on Cape Cod. I started off first grade, and I show up in public school, and I'm supposed to learn how to read. Well, I couldn't do it. Other kids were sounding out the words, not me. You know, see, spot, run, and I couldn't get phonics. It just didn't compute. September, October, November, I'm not reading. We'd sit at these little round tables reading out loud. Come to be my turn, I'd stammer and I'd stutter. And I wasn't getting anywhere. Well, back then in Chatham and most places around the country, Chatham was a particularly not sophisticated town. We used to call it a drinking town with a fishing problem, you know. And you know, so if you were a kid who couldn't learn to read, they didn't have experts and evaluations and all that. Your diagnosis was perfectly obvious. Stupid, you know, and the treatment plan was try harder, you know, and if that didn't work, they had methods to get you to try harder, like put you in the corner or a dunce cap or smack you a few times. And if that didn't work, well, you're just very stupid, and there you have it, you know. I was lucky. I had one of the many reasons I believe in God. I had a first grade teacher by the name of Mrs. Eldridge, and she knew there was more to little boys and girls who couldn't read than being stupid. And there were better ways to help them than humiliate them. And so what would she do? She was this short lady. I can see her so well. Very, very plump. She had no formal training in reading that I know of, but she'd been teaching first grade for about 75 years, you know. So she would simply, at reading period, come over and sit down next to me. And it was back when old ladies used to wear a lot of powder, remember that? You know? So she'd sort of arrive like a sugar donut, you know, sprinkling, you know, and you know, creating this little cloud for the two of us to sit in. And then she'd sit down, come to be my turn to read. She'd put her arm around me and she'd say, "No, go ahead, you can do it, just keep at it." She didn't excuse me from it, but she'd put her arm around me. So there'd be her forearm there and my little head here and this enormous cushion right here. And she would hug me into that, and I would feel so safe, you know, and nobody would laugh at me because I had the mafia sitting next to me, you know, and that was my treatment plan. That was my IEP, was Mrs. Eldridge's arm. But it was brilliant. It was all she could do, but it was really all she needed to do. That arm took out of the equation what are the real learning disabilities. You know, I have both ADD and dyslexia, and I wouldn't trade either of those for the world. I think people who don't have ADD have attention surplus disorder, you know, these boring bureaucrats, you know, but the real learning disabilities are shame and fear and believing you're substandard and believing you can't do it. That's what disables someone. And it really, you think about it, yes, it does. And so without knowing exactly what she was doing, but instinctively, Mrs. Eldridge cured me of those disabilities. I looked forward to reading period, and that's pretty amazing to take a 6-year-old little boy and have him look forward to publicly demonstrating his incompetence every day. But I looked forward to that hug. And the part of me that had talent with words was able to begin to inch its way out ever so slowly. Now, by the end of the year, I was still the worst reader in the class. I have dyslexia, you know. But I was a very enthusiastic, terrible reader. And I ended up majoring in English while doing pre-med, and now I make my living with words. And so the downside of my dyslexia did minimal damage. And the good part, the talents embedded in dyslexia, were able to carry the day. That's what I mean by connection at school. Absence of fear, absence of shame. And the same thing, by the way, for adults in the workplace. If you want to get the best results, feel good when you're walking into your office. If you have to leave half of your personhood in the glove compartment, you're in the wrong job. What else goes into a connected childhood? Connection to a pet. If you can possibly have a pet, have a pet. Pets are incredible teachers of connection. And in the happy people I interviewed, so many of them mentioned a pet and a grandparent. The sort of two universal ingredients. If you can't have a pet, you can't have a pet. But if you possibly can, they're worth the poops, believe me. They are incredible teachers of connection and of life lessons. And they're just abundant givers of unconditional love. Have a pet. Connection to nature. Get outdoors. Too many kids now are sitting in the basement playing games, Get outdoors, connect with nature. When I was a kid, we did something that's now obsolete. It was called go out and play. Make up your games, supervise yourselves. Instead, now parents are schlepping their kids from one enriching activity to the next from morning till night. Nobody really enjoys it that much. It's part of this forced march toward, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, just think, if that were true, we should be giving lectures on what to do with the bottom 99.5%. It's just so manifestly not true, but the kind of giving up of childhood ought to be a special protected time where you explore and discover and connect, not start at age 4, writing your application, for some college, as if that were a passport to a great life. Believe me, it isn't. George Valiant's study proved that, and any number of other studies you could cite. What else? Connection to the past. Some, not just history lessons, but some, you interview grandparents. It's a great thing in grade school. Do a grandparent project and hear about life through the eyes of your grandparents. Connection to family traditions, ethnic traditions, religious traditions, geographical traditions. My goodness, in Concord, what a just an incredible hotbed of connection to the past. You can do it through a name. My daughter is in fact named Lucretia Mott Hallowell, and that's because my great-great-great-great-grandmother was this little Quaker lady by the name of Lucretia Mott, who worked to free slaves and advance women's rights. And just in her name, Lucy has a connection to the past, and it's come to mean a great deal to her. At first, she thought Lucretia was a pretty cumbersome name to carry through life, but now she's very proud of it. Connection to teams, to clubs, to groups, to favorite activities. And that's why you want to expose kids to as much as possible, not to pad their resume, but to find out where their brain lights up. The only way you'll find out is to try, keep trying things, and don't let your kids use avoidance as a coping style. It becomes a habit, and it's a really self-limiting kind of habit. So encourage, coerce, bribe, do whatever. And by the way, any expert who says you shouldn't bribe children doesn't have children, You clearly have to bribe children. But get them to try as much as possible to see. It's the best neuropsych test we've got. Try this, try that, try this, try that. See where your brain lights up. And a connection to some kind of spiritual reality. I told you I happen to be an Episcopalian, so we did it through that lens. The Boston Globe magazine just had a piece on so many folks who had a bad experience with religion, just reject religion, and that's okay, but it leaves a kind of void. What kind of spiritual instruction or exposure do you want to give your children? And I urge you, think of something. And the same thing for yourself. The same thing for yourself. These big questions, the more you wrestle with them, not in the foxhole, the more, there's no atheist in a foxhole, but the more you wrestle with these questions before you're facing death, before you're facing tragedy, before you're facing disaster, the better off you'll be. And you don't have to do it in church or synagogue or, a Buddhist retreat, but you should do it somewhere. And it's usually better to do it with some other people. It's one of those things that works better with other people than alone, usually. So think of some way of setting aside time every week to wonder. And the spiritual connection, that's what it is about. It's not another body of knowledge. It's about connecting to what is beyond knowledge, honoring what is beyond knowledge, what can't be proven. And in this very scientific age we live in, we often dismiss what can't be proven as irrelevant. Well, it's tremendously relevant. Why is there evil? And what happens after death? And, just to wonder. That's what grows the spiritual connection. I love the prayer of the man who said, Lord, help me always to search for the truth, but spare me the company of those who have found it. So it's not a matter of ramming answers down to people. That's why, so many people turned off to organized religion, because they, had the bad experience of being indoctrinated and punished and scared and guilt-tripped and all this kind of stuff that was done so often, But don't just leave that blank empty. Search, wonder. And as you do that, you will develop this spiritual connection. It's not a belief necessarily, but it's an intimation that wavers. It's not a steel beam, usually. But it is an important part of human existence. As you raise children in this soup of connection, of positive points of connection, you'll see something wonderful happen. And if you do it yourself, you'll see something wonderful happen within yourself. You'll develop a positive connection to life and to yourself. A feeling of, I like life and I like myself. And as that gets going, it's like a reverberating circuit. It's like a beating heart. It just continues and continues and continues and continues. You don't have to love yourself. I think that term has been way overdone in mental health. And it's been my experience that an awful lot of people who love themselves shouldn't. And so the goal is not to love yourself, but to like yourself enough that you can be real. That you don't have to put on airs. That you don't have to pretend to be someone other than who you are. And if you can do that, then what you will get is genuine connection wherever you go. And it is the greatest feeling in the world. It's the greatest tool we've got to deal with adversity and to celebrate good stuff. Genuine connection. As I said at the beginning, it's free and it's infinite in supply. All you have to do is take it seriously. And the next thing you know, you will just feel better every day. Will bad things happen? Absolutely. Guaranteed, bad things will happen. But you'll be so much better able to deal with them. So much better able to bounce back. So much more resilient. So much better able to help others. So much better able to feel motivated and good about being alive in this weird thing called life. It's a weird thing we're born into. We're born to suffer and wonder why, It's a strange thing, but that's what we do. And the best way to get through it in a joyful way is making use of this force of connection. Okay, now the next 4 steps follow naturally. The second step is to play. Now by play, I don't just mean what kids do at recess. By play, I mean any activity in which your imagination lights up. An avid stockbroker is playing when he's researching the stock. He's imagining this, that, and the other thing. Or playing when he makes a deal. Or brain surgeons, they play in the OR. Believe me, I know a lot of surgeons. They love to cut. They're like boys in a sandbox or something. They're in their glory. So you want to find activities where your imagination gets involved. And classrooms ought to be hotbeds of that. Unfortunately, in schools too often, the opposite happens. Play is inhibited, and you get this sort of robotic, just do what I tell you to do. The results can be devastating. I learned this. I spent some 8 years consulting at the Harvard Chemistry Department after a rash of suicides they had over there. That's another story. But one of the things I learned in my years working with that department, and great people, Jim Anderson, Stuart Schreiber, just wonderful people who really committed, sacrificed the time to change the culture of that department. But every year, Harvard has 5 Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, so they get the top applicants from around the world to be graduate students and postdocs. And so every year you get a new crop, and they're all, the top of the line in terms of the numbers, the resumes. And every year they segregate into 2 groups. They arrive in Cambridge, and the mandate is go into the lab and discover new knowledge. One group runs into the lab, ready to mix chemicals like they've always wanted to do. And the other group freezes up and says, you got to tell me what to do. I'll do whatever you want, but you got to tell me what to do. I'll stay up all night running your experiments for you, but you got to tell me what to do. Those are the ones who, back around 5th grade, got the message that if you want to do well, do exactly what you're told. And they did that very well. But their capacity to imagine and invent and create atrophied. And they're never going to be the scientist that they otherwise might have been able to become. So make sure your kids, and you in your life, give full rein to your imagination. I was very lucky. The high school I went to, Exeter, up in New Hampshire, incredible school. People think of Exeter as very staid and conservative. In fact, it's not at all. It was a very radical place. All the classes were taught at round tables. It was all discussion. Peter Blum, who's here tonight, he's a classmate of mine, and he remembers, I'm sure, as do I. Those classrooms were just like crucibles of thought, of play, of questioning, of debate, of the life of the mind, and we all got turned on to the life of the mind, at this cold, snowy school in New Hampshire, but boy, was it hot in terms of intellectual excitement, and that's what I mean by play. And then when you get into something, as Csikszentmihalyi, you head into flow, you keep at it. That's work. Well, working at something that's challenging, that matters to you, those 2 key ingredients, challenging and matters to you. Working at something that's challenging and leads you to make progress, and that creates confidence and self-esteem and motivation. And those, believe me, are 3 ingredients that do predict. See, what predicts a great life are not scores, but attitudes. The attitudes you develop growing up, confidence, self-esteem, grit, the ability to bounce back, optimism. Seligman's shown this beyond any doubt. And optimism doesn't mean being Pollyanna. Optimism means, go ahead, life, throw me your worst curveball, I'll find a way, I'll find a team to handle it. It's a very muscular attitude, optimism is. It says, I can take whatever you've got to throw at me. Won't be easy, but I'll find. That's optimism. And if you can teach your kids that skill, it's these attitudes that carry you to a great life. And as I said, as you make progress at something that's challenging, that matters to you, you grow in confidence, you grow in self-esteem, you grow in motivation. And then you get step 5, which is recognition. Other people notice, people you care about. Say, good job. You don't have to win a prize. You don't have to get written up in the paper. Just somebody you respect gives you a pat on the back, says good job. That not only consolidates the confidence, self-esteem that making progress laid down, but it connects you to the wider group. And that really is the root of moral behavior. Parents naturally wonder, how can I make sure my kid will do the right thing when no one's looking? The best way is to make sure that kid feels recognized by the group. Immoral behavior usually is committed by people who feel left out, overlooked, dissed, exploited, taken advantage of. And so a program in moral education is not so much a program in memorizing the 10 Commandments, but a program in connection, in bringing in the outliers. It's not only good for the outliers, it's good for the inliers too. It's good for the whole community to make sure nobody feels rejected and despised. Well, there you have it. There you have my good news, evidence-based recipe for a long and happy life, resting on the cornerstone of this force of connection, which if only people would take seriously, absolutely animates, enlivens, and protects you against all the tough stuff that life inevitably offers up. I hope I've succeeded in my goal that you will leave happier and more hopeful than when you came in. And we do have a couple of minutes if you want to ask me any questions. Yes?
How important is it to well-being for a person to accept their limitation? And in other words, I'm 5 feet tall, I'm never going to be a supermodel. I mean, or should you deceive yourself?
The question is, how important is it for you to accept your limitations? And she went on to say, I'm 5 feet tall, I'm never going to be a supermodel. I think you're cute as a button, you know. So I think, well, fine, you won't be a runway model. Those people are weird. I mean, they're really weird. They're these walking, you know, skeletons, you know, that are 6 feet tall. I mean, you know, that's somebody's idea of attractive. I don't think it's attractive at all. You're a cute little petite thing. You probably got a really cute tush, you know. I think you don't want to. I think you want to reframe what you might see as a limitation and turn it into an asset. Is what I'm saying. There's a lot of people. Now, sure. I mean, you know, if I wanted to play center field for the Red Sox, you know, that would have not have been a realistic goal for me. But be careful of this word realistic, because you can. I always say to parents, be a dream maker, not a dream breaker. You know, so don't ever say you can't.
Well, I used to tell my kids they were fabulous at everything, but they smart and they knew that wasn't true.
So fine. She used to tell her kids they were fabulous at everything and they were smart and knew it wasn't true. They just knew it was mom. And it was really your way of saying I love you. Don't worry about that. Tell them they're fabulous at everything. Other people will correct them. They know it's not true. You know, so just go ahead and tell them they're fabulous at everything. That's what moms do. You know, that's why they pay you the big bucks. You know, I think this idea of being realistic and a realistic assessment of your child. Said no. As a mother, lay it on thick. You know, and don't worry. There's enough people in the world who will tell you in chapter and verse about all the ways in which you're not perfect. You want to have a few people who just, you know, there's a famous line, a very famous man was asked how he had achieved so much, and he said, it's because in my mother's eyes, I only saw smiles. And it's a great thing if you can, that doesn't mean you spoil them, you set limits, but if the basic feeling when the kid or whoever thinks of mom is a smiling presence, that's very formative. That's very wonderful. So don't worry about, you know, telling them they're perfect. That's just fine.
Yeah. You made a passing reference to the benefits in schools of having children interview their grandparents and so on. But I'd like you to say a little bit more about the benefits of cross-generational connectedness and the importance of people of all ages having friends both much older and much younger.
Absolutely. And the cross-generational connection, it's so interesting and it's so fun. I mean, a visit to a nursing home or a visit to, old people are marvelous storytellers. They've seen it all, you know, and they're marvelous imparters of wisdom. And they're, you know, I think it's a shame for kids to dismiss old people as boring just because they're not quick and they're not on their thumbs texting. Grandparent projects are wonderfully interesting, and it's really good for the old people to have contact with the young people. You know, I'm an older parent, and having young kids has really helped keep me young. You know, so the cross-generational dialogue and contact is good for everybody involved. It's you know, and I think ageism is one of those isms that we really should. It's so self-defeating to cross off people over the age of 70 or 80 as if they're demented and boring and anything but. I mean, I love talking to older people. And you know, bring your kids with you and you know, it's the lack of respect, but it shouldn't be just about respect. It should also be enjoyment. And as I tell you, with the number of happy people that I interviewed, the number of times Grandma or Grandpa came up was almost invariably among. They'll remember Grandma and Grandpa. So, and again, you know, you may be sitting there thinking, I know all this, and you probably do know all this. But do it. Act on what you know. Don't just say, I know it, and then, give me some new data. Tell me the latest finding, you know, tell me the latest, you know, we have this obsession with what's new. Well, some things are so true, they're very old. And a lot of what I've been telling you this evening is very old. It's just that people have forgotten it. And they've rushed off, you know, our love affair with technology. And I love it too. Believe me, my iPhone is sitting right over there. You know, we all love it. But be careful. You want to be in charge of it, not have it be in charge of you. And that's a critical difference. And the same thing about being too busy. You don't want to overcommit. You don't want to become a victim of your own enthusiasm. So even though everything you're doing is wonderful, you've got so much of it that you don't enjoy any of it. Yes?
A large part of our children's lives is spent at school.
Is what?
Spent at school.
Yes.
And I wondered if you had any thoughts about the public school and how they are working with kids to help them be happy.
Well, you know, do you all hear the question? The question was, what are public schools doing working with kids to help them be happy? And of course it varies from school to school, but as a generalization, very little would be my answer. We have become obsessed with test scores, you know, and educational reform in the Bush administration was all about test scores, and now unfortunately in the Obama administration, the same thing. Bush, it was No Child Left Behind. Obama, it's the race to the top. And it's well-meaning but very misguided. I just wish I could get 5 minutes with someone in power, because if they would take connection scores as seriously as they take test scores, we'd get a lot better results. If you would measure and take as seriously a child's connection score in first, second, third grade, and intervened as aggressively as we do with math and reading problems, we'd get far better results. And guess what? It's a lot easier to raise connection scores than it is test scores. We are really putting the cart before the horse, and it's a mistake. The cynical part of me says politicians like it because, you know, they can. It's so easy to quantify, and, you know, who's going to say, no, I'm in favor of low test scores, you know? So you can give the illusion of educational reform when in fact you're making the education worse. The Chinese are catching on to this. The Chinese they know what a good education is, and guess what they're doing? They're bringing over folks. They're basically trying to bring Exeter to China. They want the round table education in China. They know that's what the future depends upon, people with an imagination, people who are self-starters, people who are free thinkers, not these little robots who know how to memorize and forget. And unfortunately, what's happening in public education is this massive attempt to raise test scores as if that translated into something of value, and it really doesn't. We know what works. It's just a shame that the people in power aren't implementing it. Yes, sir.
Yes, could you comment on a couple of things? First of all...
Now, you seem like a happy man. Yes.
First of all, I'm of your generation, I believe. I'll be 63 sometime.
Old guys.
And
You'll be 63 sometime. Okay.
Yeah, anyway, growing up, I remember it was very straightforward. You went to school, you started first grade at 6, and then I repeated fourth grade, but to go on and on, it was sort of ABC. You go to school, high school, go to college for 4 years, and then go to work, or maybe the military if you were unfortunate, but whatever. But there was no concept of maybe taking time off, doing a year abroad, working before college and going back. And I think the trend now that I see it with adult ed, I mean, that seems to be very healthy. But this sort of blocking out time for school, college, work, retirement at 65, maybe now at 70, that seems so absurd. And the thing that may sort of correlate to that is our absolute obsession with speed. Fast food is probably one of the more iconic manifestations of that. But
Yeah, no, we've elevated speed to an absolute value. If it's fast, it's good, and if it's slow, it's bad.
Just drive down any turnpike and see how many people go past you when you're going the speed limit. I've observed that.
I bet you've observed many things. I bet you've observed many things. Yes, yeah. Those are good comments. Yes.
Two parts of the question. First, talk more about combating this culture of anxiety over manufacturing.
Yes.
And ingesting and reinforcing themselves as consumers.
Okay, let me jump on that, because I'll forget if you go on to another question. It's my ADD, you know. So by far, the best advice I can ever give on this topic of combating anxiety and the culture of anxiety, and you should teach this to your kids, teach it to yourself, to your kids, wherever you go. Never worry alone. It's fine to worry, just don't worry alone. Worry becomes toxic when you worry alone. When you worry with someone, that's called problem solving. You don't want to get rid of worry. We call that denial. People who don't worry are in big trouble. You know, but you want to worry wisely, and that usually means problem solving with someone else. Worrying alone is where the bad things happen. And it comes back to connection. And that's the problem with, the screen culture. People are worrying alone. They're interacting with Google instead of each other. Now, not to say you can't do both, and used properly, this technology facilitates connection rather than replaces it. And so I'm just saying, use it wisely. And my 3-step handy dandy, take it with you, first aid kit for worry. Never worry alone. Get the facts, make a plan. Those 3 steps. So you talk to someone, then you get the facts, whether it's a medical question, a financial question, a friendship question, get the facts and make a plan. You're better off taking action than being passive. If your plan doesn't work, you revise it. That's what life is. Revising plans that don't work. But you always want to remain in that active mode. Never worry alone. Get the facts, make a plan. Simple. Yes?
I did attachment parenting and all the problems came through that.
I'm sorry?
I did attachment parenting, Dr. Sears.
Yes.
Attachment parenting and all the problems that came through. What do you think of that, Dr. Sears? Attachment parenting?
I don't know it. I've heard of it, but it would be irresponsible of me to give an opinion. I'm not educated on that. That's another thing you want to be able to say in today's world. I don't know. You really, we sort of feel a pressure to be conversant on everything. And what you get is a lot of people who can give you a soundbite on anything, but it's about that deep. So Dr. Sears and attachment parenting, I'm sure is wonderful, but I don't know. Is it wonderful?
Incredible.
Incredible.
What you're talking about, yeah.
Wonderful, good.
All the problems that came through. And If you raise a connected kid, they're just gonna thrive.
Great. Wonderful. 2 more questions, then I'm going to send you home. Yes?
How do you reconcile the idea of letting your children try everything to see what lights them up and with not overscheduling?
Yeah, how do you reconcile try everything with overscheduling? It's a very good question. The point where you want to intervene is when it's no fun anymore. When the book bag is too heavy to carry, when the schedule, when both the mom and the kid are getting home and saying, "I can't wait to go to bed," then you're overloaded. So you can't expose yourself to everything. Yes.
And further to that, if they get into one thing, but then they immediately want to do something else, or they want to do something else, and the things light them up, but they keep moving on.
Yeah, no, that's another, the question is, you switch from one thing to the next. You really need to keep them at something, so the classic example is don't let them quit their music lessons. Keep them at it and hound them and nag them and all that kind of stuff. And, we did with Lucy, my daughter. She wanted to take violin starting at age 6 simply because her friend was doing it. So every year we'd have the following discussion. Do you want to continue violin? Yes. Do you know if you do that you're going to have to practice? Yes. Do you know you won't practice unless we nag you? Yes. Do you want us then to nag you? Yes. Okay. That's your contract for the year. You can't renegotiate until next year. And so, and she took until 12th grade. Yes, so you do have to nag and goad and don't let them weasel out of it, and that's part of the hard job of parenting, is to not let them quit, not let them give up, and you gotta be tough about it, but you're really doing them a favor, and to teach them that that it is a value that you persist in the face of difficulty. And encourage them. You don't taunt them. Too bad, you got to suffer. But don't let them get out of it. Well, listen, I'm going to stop and invite you all to go home. Whoever has that list of email addresses, that pad, if you bring it up to me. You've been a wonderful audience, and I appreciate your attention.